From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media or Voice of America on the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Thursday urged Filipinos to embody courage and integrity in their daily lives as the nation marks Araw ng Kagitingan. In his message, the President said the commemoration is not only about remembering the heroism of World War II defenders, but also about reflecting that same spirit in everyday choices and acts of service. President Marcos honored the bravery of Filipino soldiers who fought in Bataan and Corregidor, noting their sacrifices paved the way for the country's freedom. Araw ng Kagitingan, observed every April 9th, marks the fall of Bataan in 1942 and the start of the Bataan Death March, where thousands of Filipino and American troops endured extreme hardship on the 140-kilometer trek to Camp O'Donnell. The day also highlights the resistance in Bataan and Corregidor, which delayed the advance of Japanese forces in the Pacific. President Marcos said the legacy of valor lives on in Filipinos who continue to preserve for their families and the nation. The chief executive added that compassion, unity, and love of country remain essential values as the country confronts modern challenges.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. reaffirmed the government's commitment to expanding services for Filipino veterans as the nation marked Araw ng Kagitingan at the Mount Samat National Shrine in Bataan. In his address, the President said honoring the country's war heroes must translate into concrete programs that improve their welfare. He highlighted ongoing efforts to widen healthcare access, including plans to build veterans' hospitals in the Visayas and Mindanao and the rollout of Valor clinics nationwide. President Marcos reported that more than 2,600 veterans and dependents received medical assistance last year, while nearly 147,000 pensioners continued to receive monthly benefits. He also cited education and financial support programs, including increased disability pension rates under Republic Act or RA 11958. Araw ng Kagitingan, observed every April 9th, commemorates the fall of Bataan in 1942 and the start of the Bataan Death March, one of the most harrowing chapters of World War II in the Philippines. President Marcos paid tribute to the defenders of Bataan and Corregidor, calling their courage a lasting guide for future generations. The chief executive also noted the unveiling of a Czech marker honoring Czech nationals who fought alongside Filipino troops, underscoring international solidarity in the fight for freedom. President Marcos said the lessons of Bataan remain relevant today as the country faces modern challenges, including global tensions that continue to affect Filipino households. The President emphasized that compassion, unity, and collective effort remain essential to nation building.
We gather here today to remember those who stood firm in the face of overwhelming adversity, as well as to reaffirm the values that they lived and that they died for, the values of courage, of dignity, and an unyielding love of country. The heroes of Bataan gave their all so that we and the generations that follow may inherit a nation that is free, sovereign, and worthy of their sacrifice. We also witnessed earlier the unveiling of the check marker for World War II to honor the Czech nationals who chose to stand with us in the defense of Bataan. Their story reminds us that the fight for freedom knows no borders and that solidarity, even in the darkest of times, is a force that binds humanity together. 84 years ago, Filipino and Allied forces, outnumbered and outgunned, stood their ground. For months, they held the line with steady resolve and dauntless bravery, delaying the advance of an invading force at immense personal cost. And when the defenses finally fell, they faced one of the darkest chapters in our history, the Bataan Death March. Yet even in defeat, the spirit of the Filipinos did not break. Across our archipelago, resistance took many forms. Guerrillas fought in the mountains. Civilians risked their lives to shelter and sustain those who were in hiding. Even those without arms found way to serve the cause of freedom. This is the essence of our strength as a people. Not merely the ability to fight, but the will to endure. Not only to survive hardship, but to rise above it with dignity intact. The story of Bataan is a cornerstone of our national identity and a guiding light for the generations that follow. And in honoring our heroes who made all of these possible, we must ensure that they receive the care and support that they deserve.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Thursday, Malacañang said President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. will stay focused on resolving the country's energy emergency despite a surge of online disinformation questioning his health. Presidential Communications Office or PCO Acting Secretary Dave Gomez reported that the agency's anti-fake news desk detected a sudden and coordinated spread of false claims across social media platforms. He said the government is preparing legal action against those responsible. Gomez stressed that the president remains concentrated on addressing the energy crisis, which was declared a national emergency following global oil supply disruptions linked to tensions in the Middle East. He added that even traditional media outlets have been affected by the spread of misleading posts. The PCO is now gathering and documenting evidence for possible charges. According to Gomez, authorities are working to identify the individuals and networks behind the disinformation campaign, which he suggested was intended to undermine the administration. President Marcos earlier dismissed rumors about his health, saying he has returned to his normal routine after recovering from diverticulitis in January.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine government is set to launch a nationwide service contracting program on April 15th to help cushion commuters and public transport workers from the impact of rising fuel prices. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. announced the rollout in a video message Thursday, following the latest meeting of the Unified Package for Livelihoods, Industry, Food, and Transport, or UPLIFT Committee, the interagency body coordinating the response to global oil price shocks tied to tensions in the Middle East. Under the program, public utility vehicle or PUV operators and drivers will receive payments ranging from 40 pesos to 100 pesos per kilometer on top of their regular fare collections. Commuters will also get at least a 20% fare discount. The president said the initiative will prioritize routes connected to train lines and major bus corridors to improve overall mobility. He added that the program will cover around 50,000 PUVs, 1,000 operators, and as many as 15 million passengers nationwide. Service contracting will be implemented during off-peak hours to ensure transport availability beyond rush periods. All participating units will be monitored through GPS to track compliance and maintain service quality. The program revives a pandemic-era scheme originally designed to stabilize public transport operations, now repurposed to address cost pressures from rising fuel prices. The announcement comes as the country faces a declared energy emergency amid global supply disruptions linked to geopolitical conflict in the Middle East.
Kaya naman, simula April 15, ipapatupad ng DOTR ang Service Contracting Program. Sa ilalim ng programang ito, babayaran namin ang ating mga operator at driver ng mula 40 pesos hanggang 100 piso kada kilometro. Dagdag ito sa kanilang kita mula sa pamasahe. Para naman sa mga commuter, may kasamang hindi bababa sa 20% na diskwento sa pamasahe. Ang mga ruta ay nakatuon sa mga lugar na may koneksyon sa tren at pangunahing mga bus route upang maging mas maayos, mabilis at maaasahan ang biyahe. Ipapatupad ito sa buong bansa. Sasaklaw sa humigit kumulang 50,000 na PUB, 1,000 operator at aabot sa 15 milyong pasahero. Ang Service Contracting Program ay ipapatupad sa off-peak hours upang masigurong may masasakyan pa rin ang ating mga kababayan kahit hindi sa rush hour. Lahat ng sasali ay may GPS monitoring para naman matiyak na aktwal ang biyahe at maayos ang serbisyo. Patuloy ang biyahe, patuloy ang hanap buhay.
That was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, the Philippine government will grant a 10 peso per liter fuel subsidy for public utility vehicles or PUVs for up to 3 months to help ease the impact of rising oil prices. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. made the announcement Thursday in a video message saying the assistance will cover up to 150 liters per week per vehicle. The program will begin in Metro Manila next week, starting along Commonwealth Avenue, before expanding to major transport corridors such as Quezon Avenue, España, Zapote, E. Bonifacio, Rizal Avenue, and Marcos Highway. The subsidy will be distributed through accredited gasoline stations monitored by the Department of Energy or DOE to prevent misuse. The president said the measure is meant not only to support transport workers, but also to help contain increases in food and other essential goods which are affected by higher fuel costs. The initiative forms part of the government's broader response to a national energy emergency following global oil supply disruptions linked to tensions affecting key routes like the Strait of Hormuz. The government earlier implemented a fuel cash subsidy program and is also studying possible adjustments to fuel excise taxes to help bring down pump prices.
Magpapatupad tayo ng 10 piso kada litro na bawas para sa public utility vehicle na may maximum na 150 liters kada linggo sa loob ng 3 buwan. Sisimulan muna natin ito sa NCR sa susunod na linggo. Una sa Commonwealth, palalawakin natin ito sa mga susunod na araw sa Quezon Avenue, España, Zapote, A. Bonifacio, Rizal at Marcos Highway hanggang mapalawak natin ito sa buong bansa. Mahalaga ito dahil hindi lang transport cost ang tinutugunan natin. Pinipigilan din natin ang pagtaas ng presyo ng pagkain at iba pang pangunahing bilihin. Ang fuel subsidy ay ipapatupad lamang sa mga lehitimong gasoline station na aprobado at minomonitor ng Department of Energy upang masigurong mapupunta ito sa tama at hindi ito maabuso. Ginagawa natin ito lahat para manatiling maayos ang takbo ng inyong araw-araw na buhay. Ang bawat desisyon na ginagawa natin ay may isang layunin lamang: maprotektahan ang Pilipino.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Still on Thursday, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. led the distribution of financial assistance to barangays or villages in Pilar, Bataan as part of efforts to help communities manage the economic impact of the Middle East crisis. A total of 8 billion pesos in cash aid for 42,000 barangays is being released under the Bawat Barangay Makinabang program, with each village receiving 200,000 pesos for educational, social, and economic projects. Executive Secretary Ralph Recto said half of the amount, or 100,000, may be used for safety and disaster readiness initiatives, including streetlights, patrol vehicles, CCTV cameras, and power generators for health and evacuation centers. The remaining 100,000 pesos will support a finisher program for college seniors whose graduation may be threatened by economic disruptions linked to geopolitical tensions in the Gulf region. Recto said the assistance aims to help around 200,000 graduating students stay in school. The government aims to complete the distribution of cash assistance before June to ensure full utilization within the year. The Office of the President is working with the Liga ng mga Barangay to release funds and monitor their use, while the Department of the Interior and Local Government, or DILG, will oversee program implementation and compliance with budgeting and audit rules. Data from the Office of the Executive Secretary show that about 5,000 barangays received aid during the initial rollout on March 24th.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang is urging government troops to remain neutral and apolitical as they carry out their mandate to protect the nation. In a statement Thursday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro reminded soldiers to stay focused on their duty and avoid being swayed by what she described as individuals greedy for power, citing efforts by political opponents to unseat President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. Castro called on the military to remain impartial and free from personal or political interests, saying troops understand the administration's position. She also warned them not to be influenced by groups seeking to exploit the situation. Her remarks followed the speech by Vice President Sara Duterte during the Day of Valor commemoration in Davao City, where the Vice President said the current state of the nation has failed Filipino soldiers, pointing to the absence of a clear and independent foreign policy. Castro disputed that claim, saying the president's priority is to uphold national interest, particularly the country's territorial rights in the West Philippine Sea. She added that the vice president does not speak for the entire military, noting that soldiers are intelligent and professional, and citing the leadership of Defense Secretary Gilberto Chodoro Jr. and Armed Forces of the Philippines, or AFP Chief General Romeo Brawner Jr. Castro also said Duterte's allies may be frustrated after their alleged attempt to remove the president and install the vice president did not succeed. She stressed that the military's mandate is to serve the Filipino people in accordance with the law, not the political interest of any single family.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has convened the Private Sector Advisory Council or PSAC to map out targeted interventions aimed at protecting workers and generating quality jobs as tensions in the Middle East continue to pressure global fuel markets, supply chains, and employment. During a meeting at Malacañang Palace on Wednesday, Council members presented a series of proposals to help shield Filipino workers and businesses from the effects of global volatility. The President said both sides were aligned on the steps needed to manage the impact of ongoing geopolitical developments. In a statement, the Council said its recommendations include rapid job matching, workforce redeployment, and the fast-tracking of government and private sector projects to absorb displaced workers. It also pushed for expanded job fairs, quicker hiring processes, and the immediate restart of infrastructure and school construction. To support overseas Filipino workers or OFWs who may be affected by disruptions abroad, the Council proposed streamlined redeployment procedures, micro-credential training across key industries, and expanded assistance for small enterprises. PSAC lead convener Sabin Aboites underscored the need to preserve jobs now while preparing the workforce for long-term transformation, saying investments in skills and enterprise support will help keep Filipinos competitive. The Council also recommended digital distribution of targeted subsidies and possible extensions of tax incentives for export-oriented firms, noting that rising fuel prices are driving up operating costs. It further called for continued financial support for public transport operations to ensure uninterrupted services. Another key proposal is the rollout of AI upskilling para sa digital ascenso or AIUDA, a rapid reskilling program designed to transition workers into digital and remote roles within weeks. The initiative outlines tiered learning pathways, from basic AI-assisted tasks to higher-value digital work such as data annotation, virtual assistants, analytics, and online entrepreneurship. The Council said the program builds on private sector efforts like Elevate Artificial Intelligence Data Annotation or AIDA, which trains Filipino women for AI-related digital jobs. It added that more flexible learning options, faster release of government subsidies, and regulatory adjustments for schools and training providers would help strengthen long-term workforce resilience.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.